Well, good morning, everyone. If you are new or visiting or watching online, my name is Matt, and I get the joy of being the priest here in this beautiful community. We are heading into our summer series. We're looking at the fact that He cares, and we've just left this. Who was here for the Revelation series? Anyone? Just me? Yeah. So we have. I'm quite proud of myself. We've concluded a series, everybody. I don't think I've ever done that at Unlimited before. I am, as you'll find out, a starter wanderer. Laura's laughing quietly in the background. And so I'm going to talk about three things that I found really challenging over the last few months, /years, my whole life. And we're going to dive into rest today. And we're diving in for a few reasons. Firstly, I think we really need it. As a community, we're tired. The conversations that I've been having of late are like, I'm tired and nothing is given. I'm tired and there's no let up. I'm tired and I'm heading into summer holidays with my kids and I'm exhausted. And so I want to talk about what it means to rest. I have stolen the headlines from this book here by John Mark Comer, which I think there are quite a few people in our community that have read. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and brilliant book. The beautiful thing about it is it's like font 18, and there's some bits that are like font 35, and so you can skim through this really, really, really quickly. And I'm going to steal a few headlines basically and go from there. But I'm going to talk about three things that do not come naturally to me. Firstly, silence and solitude. Silence and solitude, right? You thought, I'm going to come to church, I'm going to meet a great group of people, they're going to tell me to get together, to have good coffee, to meet people in the week. Yet no, they tell me, find some silence and some solitude. Second thing, Sabbath, old language, the day of rest. I'm going to dive into that. And thirdly, something that I find hard is simplicity and slowing. Simplicity and slowing. Just turn to the people you're with and ask them, which one of those things do you think it would be most helpful to dive into for you? Silence and solitude, a day of rest, and simplicity and slowing. 20 seconds on the clock. Just ask the person next to you, which one do you want to dive into most? Okay, that was quick. Okay, who said the first one? Who said the first one? Okay, you're with me. Who said the day of rest, Sabbath? Yeah, okay. Who said simplicity and slowing? Okay, well, that's the shortest section. I'm so sorry. I thought simplicity, I'd go for a shorter section, and no, we'll go there. So let's dive into silence and solitude. Sounds depressing, but I promise it's beautiful. It says this in Luke chapter 15, verse 16. But he, that is Jesus, would withdraw to desolate places and pray. The Message version puts it this way: as often as possible, Jesus withdrew to out-of-the-way places for prayer. Out-of-the-way places for prayer. In Mark chapter 1, we're diving into Mark next year, it says this: very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. This is where all the introverts in the room celebrate, and the extroverts look awkwardly at me and groan internally. Just a social experiment. If you were taking a train from here to London and you got the option, who would choose the quiet coach? Yeah, I'm with you. Hey, if you could sit in a cafe and there was a phone zone where you could sit and Snap and Instagram, whatever else, or there was a no phone zone, who would choose the phone zone? Yeah, you're my people. Who would choose the no phone zone? Okay, interesting. I am a phone addict, and I'd like to not be. I'll talk about that later in the talk. I was getting my eyes tested this week, and the guy said to me, I'm just going to pop out the room for 2 minutes. What's the first thing you do? Phone out, stare down. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't expecting a message. We are unable of being quiet and having solitude, aren't we? We are unable to find peace. Last week, Chris and Haley and I, we were at the back of church, out the back, and this random guy came up to us. Do you remember this? I had this really long run, and I was they were really polite. Oh, that's really interesting. And I was like, can you shut up and go? Yeah, and they were run and run. When I first moved here 30 years ago, people didn't have phones. People sat in coffee shops and they spoke to each other. Now all you do is walk on the high street and people are on their phones. And what I didn't want to say was 30 years ago, the iPhone wasn't invented. But I didn't know, that wasn't where I went with that. I was trying to go okay, yeah, and they were really polite. And I was okay, let's move on. But it's true, isn't it? It's true. Like, we are obsessed with finding space to fill the space. We're obsessed with not being comfortable about being present in the moment with just ourselves. You know, one of the reasons I love ice bathing, you know that I love an ice bath, is because in the winter when it gets down to freezing levels and you crack the ice and you get in the bath, there's a moment where all you're focused on is breathing and praying. I promise you'll pray. You'll be like, Lord, why am I in here? Lord, why am I in here? Lord, why am I in here? But there's a moment where you get into the rhythm, and there's a practice that I practice in the ice bath that carries me through the year. And as I breathe deeply in, I pray, come Holy Spirit. Actually, do it with me. Breathe in and pray, come Holy Spirit. You breathe in. And as I breathe out again, and my breathing, I'm like, pray out all that stuff that holds me back. And I sit and I breathe in, I pray, come Holy Spirit. And I breathe out, and there is nothing distracting. I'm not on my phone, I'm not worrying about stuff. I'm literally concentrated on me in this ice bath as I get 3 to 6 minutes alone with the Holy Spirit. That is what I'm after today, in a world that we are afraid of being silent, sitting with nothing. It's something I've really loved. We've been in our Hangouts, been looking at mountaintop experiences in the Bible, and understand that people would go up a mountain in the olden days to meet with God, to experience who God is in solitude by themselves with no one else around. We desperately need to carve out time like that in our lives to find silent time in solitude with God. Before we moved here, I used to go to this monastery every so often. I'd say like every half term, but it probably wasn't that much. And I basically used to hire this cabin in the grounds with a log burner and a desk. There was no signal, there was no Wi-Fi. There was literally, the way they would get your attention, they would ring a bell in a chapel. That is how like ancient it was. And we would go there, I would go there by myself, sit and pray and read the scriptures and think. And it was the most beautiful time. Down here, since we moved to Devon, our friends at St Basil's converted an old, I don't know what it's called, like a horse box kind of thing, a bit bigger than that, into a prayer room. And I haven't been as often as I'd like to go. I haven't been for a couple of years actually, but I used to go and sit and pray in the middle of this meadow. There was nothing there, and it was the most beautiful time. You know, I think as Christians, what we're called to do is to love like Jesus, to become like Jesus, to embody what he took on. What does Jesus do? He retreats a lot in quiet. After his baptism, where does he go? He goes out into the wilderness for 40 days. Early in the morning, late at night, he'd find times to pray where there was no one around. As the crowds gathered in around him, where does he go? Out into the fields. When he was tired, when he was stressed, where would he go? He would find quiet time with God. Before making big decisions like who are the disciples and who's going to come follow me, what does he do? He retreats and he prays. After doing big, like massive miracles like the feeding of 5,000, while at the same time he's grieving his cousin who's been beheaded, what does he do? He departs for solitude. When he's sad, he finds time with God. Before the crucifixion, where is he? Alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. You know, the problem is that the world that we live in is that solitude often looks like going to sit on the beach by ourselves with a pair of headphones and a good book to escape from the world. That is pure escapism, and that's beautiful if you can do it. I can't, but if you can do that, it's gorgeous. Biblical solitude is something quite different. It's the intentional time that we get to escape the world in the presence of God. We get to retreat from the mayhem of what is now into the promise of what will be into eternity. It's not that we escape into nothingness, but into the presence of God, into that intentional space where we step out of our reality and into a real, genuine, life-giving relationship with God that fuels our day to day. It says this in Mark chapter 1. If you've got a Bible, please grab it. Or if you've got a phone, grab your phone out. It says this in Mark chapter 1, verses 10 onwards. I'm going to start with 9, actually. At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee to be baptized. Jesus came to be baptized by John. As Jesus was coming out of the water, being baptized, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending like a dove, and a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." At once the Spirit sent him out into the desert. Out into the desert. And he was being tempted by Satan for 40 days. He was in the wilderness with animals, and the angels attended to him. Fascinating moment. Jesus heads out into the desert. The devil is there, tempting him in every way. And he's there with the spiritual host of heaven feeding him. John Mark Comer, in his book, he says this: the wilderness isn't a place of weakness. Isn't a place of weakness, it's a place of strength, because it was there and only there that Jesus was at the height of his spiritual powers. I'm going to cover this in our next series. But it's interesting, isn't it? When we retreat, we kind of feel like it's a weak space. But that is the space that we recover our lives, where we recover who we are, where we find out who we're really meant to be, where we get to know who God is. It is so important for us to find a rhythm, daily, weekly, monthly, annually, where we find solitude and retreat, where we can get away and rediscover our lives, where we spend intentional time with the Father, hearing his voice and his will for our lives. And we get so caught up in the now, and we come back to what will be. Yeah, like Moses comes down receiving the Ten Commandments, and what happens? His face is glowing. People are scared of him because he's been in the presence of God. Christian solitude is not a mojito on the beach, as glorious as that will be. Christian solitude is intentional time with the Father that we need, that redefines us, that restores our spirit, that as we take time out of our busy lives to intentionally seek God, we find out who we are. Every Monday night, Laura and I, we have a date night. And it's nothing special. We often have some food together. We put a film on sometimes. We chat. It's basically just quality time. Like, we try and spend quality time. We try and ask some big questions. There's often some, I was going to say some I've offended Lauren, but she's quite good at telling me when I've offended her, as am I with her. But we have these conversations, and sometimes it's like, what are we going to do? Like, how do we fix this thing? Like, what are we going to do about that? Or this thing is troubling me, or I've been thinking about this. Like, we come and we find intentional time to try and mull over life, to invest in our relationship. This is what solitude looks like for us and God. Intentional quality time. Yeah, I used to struggle with this idea because it threw me back to being in school and teachers in the room forgive me, but I was that kid outside in the corridor. Yeah, like, I literally had one teacher. I turned up to my maths lesson, and he said, "Matt, not today. We're having a productive lesson." And he threw me out before the lesson began. I didn't even get in the classroom. It reminded me of that. I felt anxious about what it would be. Someone with ADHD, I have learned that solitude is not a punishment, but it is a life-giving oxygen mask for my soul. Silence and solitude is finding time to be alone with God, not escaping the world. And so what is it? What's the practice? Well, silence and solitude is, silence and solitude. No distractions, no AirPods, no noise. Space where you can honestly pray. Pray, "Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit." Allow him to speak. Silence and solitude. Should we move on to Sabbath? This one is slightly shorter, I promise. Sabbath. It's kind of interesting, right? Do you know taking a day off is a command of God? God commands you to take a day off. It's interesting. Before, in the Ten Commandments, before don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, there was a command to take time off. You know, like, if you were writing this list, right, where would you put that in the list? I'd probably put it at the bottom. I'd be like, yeah, don't kill each other, don't do stupid stuff. You know, like, at the bottom, I'd be like, oh, and probably it's quite good to take a day off. It says this in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 10. Remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. Holy meaning set aside, set apart. 6 days you should do work and labor. And on the seventh day belongs to the Lord your God. On it, do not do any work. Seems kind of funky, doesn't it? For years, you know, I've been screaming, but I love work. I love what I do. I love the people I get to work with. I love the project I'm working on. Work is good. I'm enthused. I love work. I don't get it. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Jesus, who I think loves his work, says this: the Sabbath was made for the man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, you weren't made to be lazy and sit around. I want to use a phrase. You weren't meant to just sit around on the backside doing nothing all day. You were made to work, and therefore you need a space, a window of white space in your diary each week. Why? It says this in Genesis. On the seventh day, when God had finished his work, finished creating, finished all he'd been doing, on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Interesting, isn't it? What is our job as human beings? I think our job as human beings is to love God, enjoy him forever, and to become more like Jesus. That is our job in life. I tell you when I'm really bad at doing that, it's when I'm running on empty. I tell you when I'm not a great priest, it's when I've had sustained periods of tiredness. I tell you when the fresh content dries up, it's when I haven't rested in God's presence. I tell you when I feel spiritually hungry, it's when I've allowed busyness to get in the way with my relationship with God and haven't allowed myself to breathe in the Spirit. What I'm not saying is don't work hard. I think you were designed to work hard. You were designed to work in a place and a space where you feel tired. You were made to work hard. But what I am saying is that there was a rhythm and a cadence to how creation was made. For example, what comes after spring? Allegedly, it is summer, right? Every year. We may have summer after spring, right? That's the way it works. What does wave comes in? A wave comes in a set. You get one wave and then another wave. You sometimes get a wave, a wave, a wave. It always comes in sets. Dawn will always come after dusk. We were designed to live in a rhythm. We were designed to live away. We were designed to hustle, 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 rest. Hustle, 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 rest. Hustle, 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 rest. We were designed with such a rhythm as a reset. Not to rest and sit back and do nothing, but to actively rest. To actively rest. I remember someone saying once that if you work with your hands, rest with your mind. And if you work with your mind, rest with your hands. Rest is not the absence of effort. It's not the absence of doing stuff, but it's finding joy and enjoyment in the goodness of what God has placed in our lives. For me, the perfect kind of day of rest is a day at the beach. Barbecue, good friends, maybe a little surf, maybe a paddleboard, your family. That is good rest for me. John Mark Comer, in his book, last quote, and then we're going to break out into a conversation. He says this: the word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. The word literally means to stop. The Sabbath is simply a day of stopping, stop working, stop wanting, stop worrying, just stop. It is more than just a day. It is a way of being in the world. The spirit of restfulness from living in the Father's presence. Traditionally, that would involve being here in this space, being in a nourishing community. And so I want to break out. I want to ask the question, what is one practical step in the week to come where you can intentionally integrate these practices into your rhythm this week? And how can you cultivate a habit of taking Sabbath and solitude that allows you to pause, listen to God, and consciously realign your hearts and minds with his truth as we head into each day? Okay, so just remind you of the three headlines again. Silence and solitude. Who found that all right? Yeah, okay, even just me and two people, that's fine. Sabbath, you found that? Look, people switched off by then, that's okay. And then I want to talk about simplicity and slowing as we kind of come into land. We're about 3/4 of the way through. Basically, for this last part, I want to talk about combining the two of solitude and Sabbath. Find time each day to rest in the presence of the life-giving presence of the Holy Spirit. There's a famous line by St. Augustine of Hippo. He said this: "You made us for yourselves, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." Let's talk about simplicity and slowing. There's this beautiful there's this beautiful quote, better one hand full of tranquility than two hands full of toil, chasing after the wind. Better to have less with one hand than more with two. So I want to before we dive into this, I just want to break off and ask the question just in the little groups that we're in. Like, how do you find this? Do you find this tricky? Do you find this easy? Is this a statement I've just thrown out that kind of rocks your world? Or is this a moment that you can dive into and kind of relate to? Better to have one hand that is full of tranquility than two hands full of stress and toil. The way that I'm going to illustrate this is, it is better, if I've got two hands, imagine these are full of water and they're shaking, there's not a lot I can do with them, right? The only thing I can do with this is what? Put it down. But if I've got one hand that is full of a tray, full of stuff, I've now got margin, right? If one's about to fall, I can catch it. I can serve people. I've now got one hand that I've got room where I can. Whereas if I've got two hands full, there's not much I can do with this. There's no margin, there's no error, there's no way. Does that make sense? Okay, we're going to dive into this. Sweetheart, do you want to grab a seat? So, better to have less with one hand full than two hands where we are over capacity. Yeah, I'm aware that there are things in this summer that you can't drop. I'm aware that, like we still have hungry mouths to feed. I'm aware that we still have bosses and health and financial concerns. We still have kids around us that we can't just get rid of overnight. But I'm also aware that the next 6 weeks we can do something to intentionally rest, to intentionally lay down some of the things that we're struggling to carry. Better to have one hand full of tranquility than two hands with toil. The real heart of this is we've got to prioritize. Which do we pick up and which do we allow to drop? Like, what are these things that we're going to prioritize? What are these things are we going to allow ourselves to be consumed by? The joy of having one hand rather than two hands full means you've got to ask the questions. What am I going to lay down? What really means something to me? What really matters in my life? What can you say no to? What can you spend more time on emotionally, physically, and spiritually that embody your values? I realized a couple of months ago that my relationship with my kids was really suffering because of my phone. And, I realized that whenever my kids were like, Daddy, my attention was down looking at my phone rather than into their faces. And so I've tried to put this strategy in play. Which is between the hours of 5 and 7, my phone goes in the drawer. Tried it, it kind of worked, but my watch would ping at me. That didn't work. So I bought myself a watch that is like cheap Casio watch, one of those throwbacks to like the 90s. So I often wear no watch or a cheap Casio watch when I'm around the kids. If you see me in the high street and I've got like a no watch or Casio watch, I'm like off duty mode. And the reason is that I wanted to find a space where I can put the distractions to one side, where I can put my phone in this drawer and know that it is time for just me and the kids. My value was I want healthy, emotionally healthy kids, but my practice was this: better to have one hand full of tranquility than two hands full of toil. What's our goal? Our goal is to love God, enjoy and glorify Him forever, and to become more like Jesus. As everything kind of slows over the summer for most of us, what things can you actively put down that you're able to dig into the core values of loving God and becoming more like Jesus? What can you actively say no to become more emotionally, physically, spiritually healthier over the summer? What rhythms of simplicity and slowing do you need to put in place? For someone with ADHD, this does not come naturally. I love working on the next project. I love figuring out the problems. I love being active. Someone recently said to me, like, what do you miss about London? And the first thing that was the hustle. And they were like, that is too quick. You've got a problem. I was like, but it's true. I love it. But we are called to simplicity and slowing. And so here's where I kind of come in to conclude. A long conclusion, but a conclusion nonetheless. We need to have a healthier rhythm of silence and solitude. We defined rest that will enable us to pursue the Spirit of God and bring us genuine rest. We need to have a simplicity and a slowing as we head into the summer. There was a guy in Bournemouth called Andy By. I texted him before telling him I was going to tell this story. And I remember him saying to me, he was like this incredible windsurfer. And he was probably like about 50 at the time. But he was like, you'd see him out in the water like flying. And like often, I remember seeing him like on a Wednesday morning, for example, like flying along. Next day, Thursday morning, like flying along the bay. And I remember saying to him, I was like, oh, Andy, I'm just too busy to do this. I'm too busy to do this. And I remember he looked me in the eyes. He was a banker at JP Morgan Chase. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, busyness is a disease of the Western world. Busyness is a disease. And it's not that being busy is bad, but when we find, who we are in our busyness, when we find our identity and our worth and our meaning in our busyness, when we find out who we are because we are busy, we have an issue. And over this summer, let's break the goal and the God of busyness. Define silence and solitude. Define Sabbath and simplicity and slowing. Finally, Matthew chapter 11, the Message version, Jesus says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Learn my unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. What are the unforced rhythms of grace that you can directly insert into tomorrow? Where can you intentionally carve out time to hear his voice? Over this summer, how can you deliberately rest, finding silence and solitude each morning, each evening, just a slither of your day when the kids are watching a screen or having a play day? How can you dive into the Sabbath? This thing's slow where you can intentionally take one 24-hour period to properly rest. And how can you practice simplicity and slowing? Better to have one hand in control than two hands in chaos. Is that all right? Do you understand? We're going to pray together. Do you understand? If you're able, we're going to pray together. Aha.
Why do you have glasses?
Because I can't see you. Oh, come sit down, I'll show you that. Okay, come on in.